and welcome to today's episode of The Ferrariist. In today's episode, I'm going to detail how I became a Ferrariist. Because before being a Ferrariist, I was in fact a Fordist, and then a Volkswagenist, and then a BMWist, and then finally a Porscheist. And the story takes place about 12 to 15 years ago. At the time, I had a 997 cab, which cost me around $50,000. And I thought, okay, I'm willing to up the budget a little bit, and I want to get into Ferrari territory. Now, everyone I'd talked to was telling me horror stories and saying, what the heck are you doing? You need this much money. It's going to break down. It's got maintenance. Stick with the Germans. They're the better cars. There you go, this, that. And even in my own mind, for many, many years, I had told myself I was going to progress up the car ladder up until Porsche, and I was going to be happy there. Porsche had many different offerings that I liked, and I could easily have been happy there. But what I liked more than just Porsches was the idea of experiencing everything. And if you're an automotively inclined person, you're going to want an Italian car. I think it was Jeremy Clarkson that said that you are not an enthusiast unless you've had an Alfa. Now, where I live, unfortunately, Alfas are hard to come by. And surprisingly, Ferraris are more plentiful. So I thought, why not cut out the middleman and go straight to the big daddy, to the Ferrari? And that's always what I wanted. Now, there were 6 or 7 cars on the hit list for me to look at. There was 348s, 355s, 360s. There was even a 430 that was a little bit too high, but I thought maybe I could get it down. The 456 was there, and the 550, and also a Testarossa. All of these cars, interestingly, were within 20 or 30 grand of each other, which is not a huge spread considering they span about 3 generations and, V8s, V12s, front engine, rear engine, the whole gamut. So really, I didn't know anything about Ferrari. I didn't know anybody who owned a Ferrari, but I thought, I want a Ferrari. I'm going to be that guy. So I looked at all these cars. I remember looking at a 1988 black on black Testarossa with 50,000 kilometers. And I remember it was being sold for $67,000. And I thought, that seems like a decent price, considering that my Porsche wasn't that much less. But I thought, oh, it's going to have tons of maintenance. It's going to be a nightmare. So I walked away. Because the car that I really wanted was a 599. I remember when in 1998, I guess, when the Ferrari 599 came out, I was a university student. I remember seeing the magazine. I remember seeing that scoop. I remember seeing that styling. And it was burned into my brain as one of the prettiest things Maranello had ever come out with. It wasn't received that well in period. People thought it was ugly. People were worried that the Ferrari had gone front engine instead of rear engine. They abandoned the Testarossa formula. And there was a lot of hand wringing and pearl clutching by, the purists. But I remember thinking, that is a car that I really want. And as they say, the child is the father of the man. So 20 years later, as a man-child, I decided that's the one that I want. And so I narrowed down my search to one car. I found a 1999 example in Grigio Titanium with black leather. And it had an astonishing 98,000 kilometers on it. Now, I had been led to believe by anybody who knew anything about Ferraris that they fall apart after 20,000 kilometers. And yet here was this running, driving, apparently well-maintained example at 98,000 kilometers. And importantly, it was probably 2/3 the price of lower kilometer examples. And, it was within my range. So I said, I don't know, do I dare even call this guy? I mean, after all, he's a Ferrari owner. He probably lives in a castle, has a servant, and has no time for plebs like myself. Anyways, despite all my misgivings, I mustered up the courage to give him a call, and I said, hey man, you got this car for 70 grand. Would you possibly take 55? And surprisingly, he was a very nice man. We hummed and hawed a bit, and I talked him, and eventually he's like, all right, I'll go with 55 grand. I was ecstatic. So, given the kilometers, of course, I arranged an inspection, and the inspection came back with some minor things, some oil sweats, this, that, the other thing. Nothing that was major, like needs a new transmission, needs a new engine, misfiring, low compression. None of the big items, but just small wear and tear things. And yet, the bill to remedy all these things came to $15,000 or $17,000. So I said to him, I said, I don't care about most of these things, but can you help me some more? And he ended up accepting that. And actually, I think the bill was more than, I think it was like 20 something thousand. Nonetheless, in the end, I got the car for $40,000. And I thought, man, I can't go any better than this. $40,000 for a V12 front engine manual Ferrari. I mean, yes, please sign me up. At that time, when I went to buy this car, I had this preconception of Ferrari owners. As I said, they all live in castles, have servants, have millions, and are contemptuous about, plebs like myself. And nonetheless, I went to this guy's house, and when I got there, I was shocked. The guy lived in a regular house. He had a single car garage. Like, okay, well, maybe this is his, servant's quarters. I don't know what's going on. I don't care. I just want the car before he changes his mind. So I pay the guy, he opens the garage, and there are not one, but two Ferraris. There's a 550 that I'm about to buy, and then up top, there was a 512 TR. And then at that point, I couldn't help myself. I said, dude, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what do you do for a living? Like, how do you do this? And he goes, oh, I'm a milkman. I'm like, sorry, come again? Like, milkman, does that mean what normal people like me think it means? He's like, yeah, I'm a milkman. I'm like, that's amazing. Good for you. He said, yeah. So I'm of Italian heritage. I love Ferraris. And when I came into a bit of money about 10 years back, I bought these two cars. And now I think I'm done with them. And I've enjoyed them and I want to pass them on. I said, wow, that's amazing. I wish I had the money for the 512 TR. I didn't, but the 550 was more than enough for me. And I took that car and I really enjoyed it. And that encounter with that man was the microcosm of all Ferrari ownership, in the sense that I had a preconceived notion about ownership and owners, and here was the reality that was very different. And subsequent to that experience, I've had many, many, many other experiences that back that up. Ferrari people, for the most part, at least in the genre of cars that I'm interested in, aka 12 to 15, 20, 30-year-old cars, the semi-classic, the new classic cars, they are not, silver spoon types for the most part. They are genuine collectors or just genuinely interested people that have allocated a larger percentage of their resource to something they like. They have prioritized enjoyment over maybe just salting it away and sewing it into your mattress, which I have come to respect as a valid approach to living life. But it's not all bad, okay? You're thinking, okay, this guy's gonna piss away all this money for the sake of an experience, and then he's gonna not be able to send his kids to college. That is the concern. But guess what? The Ferrari market, although it looks static, it's actually very dynamic. Every time I buy a Ferrari, I often buy the ones that are fully depreciated. That's kind of my strategy. So at that time, that was the car that was fully depreciated. At 18 months later, when I decided I was going to change into a different car, guess what? The market had changed. And that car went from being $40,000 to, I think I sold it for $82,000. So I doubled my money on that car after having enjoyed it. So you're thinking, oh, I must have put 20 or 30 grand into it to fix it or this or that. No, the market had just moved. I think I'd put $2,000 into it for just fluid changes when I got it, and then I drove it. I didn't drive it that much because despite how big it is on the outside, it's actually quite tight on the inside. So I was never fully comfortable. It was one of the reasons I sold it. But the point was that the car paid for itself. So the money on these things is made on the buying side. But more than that, it's what I really wanted to touch on is the huge hesitation people have into reaching into a mark that they don't fully understand. And Ferrari is prototypical of that. People tend to understand German marks. German manufacturers have a mystique of over-engineering and reliability, which for the most part, I think is not necessarily earned and not necessarily valid. And conversely, the Italian marks have a reputation for haphazardness and great engines and horrible everything else. And again, there is an element of truth to that in certain models, but again, it's car specific. So is it possible that I was just exceedingly lucky? Yes, absolutely. I found the right deal and I was looking for a long time and I found the right car and I was happy with it. But at the same time, what I realized was, had I stayed in my lane and stayed with, just upgraded my Porsche, for example, I would have missed out on an experience. And now you can see through some of my videos and indeed what's behind me, I continue to be a BMWist and a Porscheist in addition to a Ferrariist. And so if you're looking and if you're worried, do the research. Shake down the details on your specific model. Okay? Satisfy yourself it's not going to break the bank. Okay? And obviously there's going to be maintenance costs and so on and so forth, but it's not going to break you. And chances are that if you buy well on the outset, you'll probably do well when you sell. Certainly in the case of my buying and selling, and now I'm on to my 10th Ferrari, I think, on and off, I've lost, I think, 10,000 on one of them. And that was because I bought a car with apparently a transmission issue. So I had to eat that when I sold the car. Every other one has made me money. And in the experience, and in the process, I've accrued probably 50 or 60,000 kilometers of enjoyment driving these cars. So that's my Ferrari story. Tell me about what your Ferrari story was. Tell me about your first dream car. Please leave it in the comments. Please like, please subscribe. Continue to watch. Thank you for your patronage, and we'll talk to you next time.